The thunder rolled across the dusty plains of Bannack, Montana, as Zelda Porter clutched her 3-month-old daughter to her chest and watched the stagecoach disappear into the horizon, taking with it her last hope that Thomas would return and make good on his promises. The April rain began to fall, soaking through her worn shawl as she stood outside the boarding house that would soon no longer be her home. She had exactly $2 to her name and nowhere to turn in this harsh mining town, where she'd followed a man who'd promised her the world and left her with nothing but a crying infant and a heart full of broken dreams. The year was 1865. The war had ended, and men were returning home across the country. But not Thomas. Thomas had fled west after discovering Zelda was with child, and she, foolish and desperate, had followed him to Bannack 6 months ago, only to find him already entangled with a saloon girl. He'd put her up in Mrs. Hargrove's boarding house with promises to make things right once he struck it rich in the mines. Last week, she'd discovered he'd left town altogether, leaving behind only a note saying he wasn't cut out to be a father. "You best come inside before you and that little one catch your death, Mrs. Hargrove called from the doorway, her weathered face creased with concern. "Though I don't know what you plan to do tomorrow when your rent's due." Zelda turned, her dark blonde hair plastered to her face from the rain. "I'll find work, Mrs. Hargrove. I promise I'll pay you." The older woman shook her head. "This ain't a town for a woman alone with a baby, Miss Porter. The mining's slowing, the men are rough, and there ain't proper work for a lady such as yourself." "I can cook, clean, sew, anything," Zelda pleaded, following her inside. Baby Emma whimpered against her chest, sensing her mother's despair. "Maybe Simmons at the general store could use help, but he won't want a crying baby about," Mrs. Hargrove sighed. "I can give you till the end of the week, then I need the room for paying boarders." Zelda nodded, climbing the narrow stairs to her small room. Once inside, she laid Emma in the wooden crate that served as her cradle. 22 years old, and her life had come to this abandoned in a mining town with a fatherless child. Back home in Ohio, she'd been the daughter of a respected schoolteacher, with prospects and a good name. Now she was just another fallen woman with a bastard child. Morning came without mercy. Zelda fed Emma and dressed in her one decent dress, a faded blue cotton that had once brought out the color of her eyes. Now it hung loose on her frame, a testament to meals skipped to save money. The muddy streets of Bannack were already busy with miners heading to their claims and merchants opening their shops. Zelda walked determinedly toward the general store, Emma bundled against her chest. She would find work today or starve trying. The bell above the door jingled as she entered Simmons' general store. "Mr. Simmons," she called out, approaching the counter where a balding man with spectacles was tallying figures in a ledger. "We don't offer credit, miss," he said without looking up. "I'm not seeking credit, sir. I'm looking for work." This made him pause. He peered at her over his glasses, then at the bundle against her chest. "That a baby you got there?" "Yes, sir. My daughter, Emma. Can't have no crying infant in my shop, miss. Disturbs the customers. She's a good baby, hardly cries at all." The lie slipped easily from her lips. Emma had colic and could wail for hours, but Zelda was desperate. "Sorry, miss. Try the hotel. Maybe they need a maid." He returned to his ledger, dismissing her. The Grand Hotel was anything but grand, a 2-story wooden structure with peeling paint, but it was the finest lodging in Bannack. The owner, a Mrs. Crawford, heard Zelda out with thin lips and narrowed eyes. "A chambermaid with a baby," she scoffed. "Who would mind the child while you worked?" "I could keep her with me," Zelda suggested, "and have her screaming while my guests are trying to rest." "I think not." Mrs. Crawford's gaze softened slightly. "Try the laundry. Chinese fellow runs it. He might not be so particular." By midday, Zelda had been turned away from the laundry, the cafe, and even the brothel where the madam had looked her up and down and said she was too skinny and sad-looking to fetch any decent price. The rain had started again, and Emma was fussing. With nowhere else to try, Zelda found herself at the door of the sheriff's office. Sheriff Riley was a kind-faced man in his 50s who listened to her plight with genuine concern. "Can't say I know of much work for a lady with a little one," he admitted. "Town's struggling since the gold's playing out. Most folks are moving on to new strikes." "I have nowhere to go, Sheriff," Zelda said, fighting back tears. "There's the church," he suggested. "Reverend Mills might know of a family needing help." The small white church at the edge of town was empty when Zelda arrived, save for a man in dusty clothes kneeling before the altar. He rose as she entered, and Zelda realized he wasn't the reverend but a stranger tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a face tanned from the sun. "Pardon me," she said, turning to leave. "I was looking for Reverend Mills." "Reverend's gone to visit the Wilkinsons' farm," the man replied, his voice deep and steady. "Their boys took ill." "Oh," Zelda's shoulders slumped in defeat. Emma chose that moment to let out a wail, and Zelda bounced her gently, trying to quiet her. The stranger approached, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "Sounds like a hungry little one." "She's not hungry," Zelda said defensively. "She ate before we came out." The man held up his hands. "Didn't mean any offense, madam. My sister's got 4 of her own. I know that sound well enough." Zelda noticed his eyes, then a striking green that contrasted with his sun-darkened skin. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way that Thomas had been, with his smooth talk and polished manners. This man had a weathered face with lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting into the sun, and a scar that ran along his jawline. But there was something solid about him, something trustworthy. "I'm Cade Quinn," he said, extending his hand. "Just rode in from Wyoming Territory." "Zelda Porter," she replied, shifting Emma to shake his hand briefly. "And this is Emma. Pleasure to meet you both." He nodded at the crying infant. "Mind if I?" He held out his arms. Startled, Zelda hesitated. No man had offered to hold Emma before, not even Thomas during the brief time he'd acknowledged her existence. "I won't hurt her," Cade assured her. "Like I said, got 4 nieces and nephews." Cautiously, Zelda handed over her daughter. To her astonishment, Cade cradled Emma expertly, placing her against his shoulder and patting her back gently. Almost immediately, her crying lessened to hiccuping sobs. "She's got the wind," he explained, continuing to pat. "My sister's youngest had the same trouble." A moment later, Emma burped loudly, then settled contentedly against the stranger's shoulder. "How did you do that?" Zelda asked, amazed. Cade Quinn smiled, and it transformed his rugged face, crinkling those lines around his eyes. "Just a trick my sister taught me. Babies need to be burped after feeding, especially the colicky ones." "I do burp her," Zelda said defensively. "No offense meant, madam. Some just need a bit more coaxing than others." He looked at her more carefully now, taking in her worn dress and the dark circles under her eyes. "You look like you could use a meal yourself. When's the last time you ate?" Zelda stiffened. "I didn't come here for charity, Mr. Quinn. I came looking for work." "And what kind of work are you seeking?" "Anything respectable," she answered. "I can cook clean, so." "I'm educated. I can read and write and do figures." Cade nodded thoughtfully. "Rare qualities in these parts." He shifted Emma in his arms, looking down at her tiny face. "Where's her father, if you don't mind my asking?" Zelda's face burned with shame. "He left. Decided he wasn't meant to be a father after all." Something hardened in Cade's expression. "That's so." He shook his head, gazing at Emma. "That child deserves a real father, not some coward who runs at the first sign of responsibility." His words, though not directed at her, stung Zelda. She had chosen poorly in Thomas, and Emma would suffer for it. "Well, she has me," she said firmly, "and I intend to provide for her if I can just find someone willing to give me a chance." Cade seemed to come to a decision. "I'm looking for someone to cook and keep house at my ranch," he said. "It's about 10 miles out of town, nothing fancy, but it's decent. Got a small herd of cattle and some horses I breed and train." Zelda eyed him suspiciously. "And you'd hire a woman with a baby. I've got a cabin separate from the main house. You'd have your privacy, and I'd expect only honest work from you: cooking, cleaning, maybe some mending. Pay would be room and board plus $15 a month." It was more than fair, especially with the housing included, but Zelda had learned to be wary of men's offers. "Why would you do this?" "You don't know me." Cade handed Emma back to her, his expression serious. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be judged for circumstances beyond your control. My pa was half Cheyenne. Folks didn't always take kindly to that." Zelda looked more closely at him, noticing the high cheekbones and straight black hair that hinted at his heritage. "I didn't realize. Most don't till I tell them. I pass well enough." He shrugged. "Point is, I know what it's like when doors close in your face. And that little one there shouldn't suffer because her father's a no account." Hope flickered in Zelda's chest, but caution tempered it. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Quinn, but I'd need to know more before I agreed to go 10 miles from town with a stranger." He nodded, seeming to respect her prudence. "Fair enough. Sheriff Riley knows me, as does Reverend Mills. Ask about me. I'll be at the livery stable till tomorrow morning if you decide to take me up on it. After that, I'm heading back to my ranch." As Cade Quinn walked away, Zelda found herself studying his retreating figure, the broad shoulders, the confident stride. There was strength there, but not the threatening kind. For the first time since Thomas had left, she felt a flicker of something other than fear and despair. That evening, after returning to her room at the boarding house, Zelda visited Sheriff Riley while Mrs. Hargrove watched Emma. The sheriff confirmed that Cade Quinn was a respected rancher who occasionally brought horses to sell in Bannack. "Quinn's a good man," Riley said. "Keeps to himself mostly, but he's fair in his dealings. Never known him to cause trouble or be in debt. His ranch isn't large, but it's well run, and he's safe," Zelda asked hesitantly. "For a woman alone, I mean." The sheriff understood her meaning. "I've never heard a whisper against his character in that regard. He's had a housekeeper before, an older woman who moved to California to be with her daughter last winter. Never heard a complaint." It wasn't a complete guarantee, but it was more reassurance than Zelda had expected. After a nearly sleepless night weighing her options, which were, in reality, almost non-existent, she packed her few belongings the next morning and made her way to the livery stable. Cade was there, saddling a magnificent black stallion. 2 pack horses stood nearby, already loaded. "Mr. Quinn," she called, approaching with Emma bundled against her, "if your offer still stands, I'd like to accept the position." He turned, studying her face before nodding. "Offer stands. You have belongings to fetch," she gestured to the small carpet bag at her feet. "This is everything." Something flickered across his face, sympathy, perhaps, but he quickly masked it. "You and the little one can ride Dolly," he said, indicating a gentle-looking bay mare. "She's steady as they come." "I've never ridden before," Zelda admitted. "No matter, I'll lead her." He hesitated. "Do you have a way to secure the baby while you ride?" Zelda hadn't considered this. "I could hold her." "Not safe on a 10-mile ride, even on Dolly." He thought for a moment. "Wait here." Cade disappeared into the stable and returned a few minutes later with what appeared to be a large piece of cloth. "My sister used something like this for her babies," he explained, demonstrating how the fabric could be tied to create a sling that would hold Emma securely against Zelda's body. Once Emma was settled in the makeshift carrier, Cade helped Zelda onto the mare, adjusting the stirrups for her and showing her how to hold the reins. "Just relax and let Dolly do the work," he instructed. "She knows the way home." They set out under a clearing sky, the storm of the previous day giving way to spring sunshine. Zelda was tense at first, afraid she would fall and harm Emma, but Dolly was indeed steady and Cade led her horse with a sure hand. Gradually, Zelda relaxed enough to take in the scenery. The landscape beyond Bannack was stunning rolling hills covered with new grass, snow-capped mountains in the distance, and wildflowers beginning to bloom in protected hollows. After the cramped confines of the boarding house, the openness felt like freedom, even if it was an uncertain one. "It's beautiful," she murmured, more to herself than to Cade. He glanced back at her, that same transformative smile lighting his face. "Wait till you see it in full summer when the hills are covered in wildflowers and the grass is tall enough to wave in the wind." His evident love for the land was touching. Thomas had only ever talked about the gold he would find, never the beauty of the place he sought it in. "Have you lived here long?" she asked, finding herself curious about this solitary rancher. 5 years, he replied. Came west after the war, served with the Union Army and never wanted to go back east. Worked as a ranch hand for a couple years, saved every penny, then bought my place when the previous owner decided mining might make him richer. Did it? Make him rich, I mean, Cade chuckled. Last I heard, he was working as a barkeep in Virginia City. Most who chase gold end up with nothing but calloused hands and empty pockets. Like Thomas, Zelda thought bitterly. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of saddle leather and Emma's occasional soft noises. Around midday, Cade called a halt beside a small stream. "We'll rest the horses and have some food," he announced, helping Zelda dismount. Her legs were stiff and sore from the unaccustomed riding, but she tried not to show her discomfort as Cade spread a blanket in the shade of a cottonwood tree. From his saddlebags he produced bread, cheese, and dried apples, simple fare, but to Zelda, who had been rationing her meager supplies, it was a feast. Emma began to fuss, hungry herself. Zelda glanced awkwardly at Cade, unsure how to handle the situation. Understanding immediately, he stood. "I'll water the horses," he said, tactfully moving away to give her privacy to nurse. When he returned, Emma was contentedly feeding and Zelda had arranged her shawl modestly. Cade sat down on the far edge of the blanket, focusing his attention on his food. "Your ranch," Zelda began, wanting to fill the silence. "Is it very large?" "About 200 acres, he replied. "Not large by some standards, but enough for me. I run about 50 head of cattle, but my real business is horses. I breed and train them for riding and work, no racing stock, just good, reliable mounts. And you manage it all alone. Got a hand who helps with the cattle, Miguel Vasquez. Good man, been with me 3 years now. He lives in a cabin on the property with his wife, Consuela. They'll be glad to have a woman around again. Consuela gets lonely with just me and Miguel for company." The knowledge that there would be another woman nearby eased some of Zelda's concerns. Consuela Vasquez might become a friend, perhaps even help with Emma when Zelda was busy with her duties. By late afternoon, they crested a hill and Cade pointed ahead. "There it is, Quinn Ranch." Zelda's first impression was of orderliness. The building's a 2-story main house, a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, and what must be the Vasquez's cabin and her own future home were well maintained. Fields stretched beyond, and in a fenced pasture, several horses grazed. It wasn't grand, but it was solid and well cared for, much like its owner. As they rode into the yard, a man emerged from the barn, presumably Miguel Vasquez. He was shorter than Cade, with a sturdy build and a friendly face. "Jeef, welcome back," he called, then noticed Zelda and Emma. His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Miguel," Cade greeted him. "This is Miss Porter and her daughter, Emma. Miss Porter will be taking over the housekeeping." Miguel removed his hat, nodding respectfully to Zelda. "Welcome, Señorita. Consuela will be very happy to meet you." "She is at the house, preparing dinner." Cade helped Zelda dismount, steadying her when her legs threatened to buckle after the long ride. "Let's get you and Emma settled in your cabin first," he said. "You can meet Consuela at dinner." The cabin that would be their new home was small but sturdy, with a main room containing a wood stove, table and rocking chair, and a separate bedroom. It was clean and smelled of soap and wood smoke. "Consuela aired it out and got it ready when I sent word from town," Cade explained. "Stove works well, and there's a good supply of firewood stacked outside. Pump is just outside the door for water. Outhouse is around back." It was simple but far better than what awaited them in Bannack homelessness or worse. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn," Zelda said sincerely. "This is more than I expected." "Cade," he corrected her. "If we're to live and work on the same property, might as well use first names." He paused. "Unless you'd prefer to keep things formal." "No, Cade is fine," she agreed. The name suited him, somehow strong and straightforward. "I'll leave you to settle in," he said. "Dinner's at 6 in the main house. Nothing fancy, but you're welcome to join us. Or I can have Consuela bring something over if you're too tired." "We'll come to the house," Zelda decided. After months of isolation in Bannack, the prospect of a meal with others was appealing, even if she was weary. After Cade left, Zelda explored the cabin more thoroughly. The bedroom contained a real bed with a clean mattress and linens, and a small crate had been converted into a cradle for Emma, lined with soft blankets. In the main room, she found basic cooking utensils, dishes, and even a small supply of staples: flour, sugar, coffee, and beans. Someone, Consuela, presumably had thought of her needs and prepared accordingly. Tears welled in Zelda's eyes at this unexpected kindness. She had been alone for so long, struggling to survive, that simple consideration felt overwhelming. After washing herself and Emma with water from the pump, Zelda changed into her spare dress, faded but clean, and made her way to the main house as the sun was setting. The ranch house was comfortable rather than ostentatious. The main floor consisted of a large kitchen and dining area, a sitting room with bookshelves lining one wall, and what appeared to be a small office. Cade greeted her at the door, freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt, his dark hair still damp. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "Consuela's just putting dinner on the table." Consuela Vasquez was a plump, cheerful woman in her 30s with a warm smile and quick movements. She greeted Zelda enthusiastically, cooing over Emma and insisting on holding her. "Such a beautiful niña," she declared, rocking the infant expertly. "And so good. My children at this age always crying, but your Emma, she is an angel." "She's usually fussier," Zelda admitted, surprised at Emma's contentment in the stranger's arms. "She must sense she's in good hands." "All babies know Consuela," Miguel said proudly. "She has the magic touch." Dinner was simple but delicious: rabbit stew, cornbread, and fresh greens from a kitchen garden that Consuela proudly told Zelda she maintained. The conversation flowed easily, with Miguel and Consuela doing most of the talking, telling stories of their 5 children, all grown and with families of their own in various parts of the territory. "You must miss them terribly," Zelda said, thinking of her own parents back in Ohio who had disowned her when she'd followed Thomas West unwed and pregnant. But they visit when they can," Consuela replied. "And now I have you and little Emma to fuss over," she winked at Zelda. Though I think perhaps someday there will be more children here, no." Zelda blushed, unsure how to respond. Cade came to her rescue, clearing his throat. "Consuela, Miss Porter is here as my housekeeper, nothing more." Consuela's eyes twinkled mischievously, but she changed the subject, asking Zelda about her cooking experience and offering to show her where everything was kept in the kitchen the next day. After dinner, Cade walked Zelda and Emma back to their cabin. The night was clear, with thousands of stars visible in the vast Montana sky. Emma had fallen asleep in Consuela's arms and didn't stir as Zelda carried her wrapped in a soft blanket that Consuela had insisted they keep. "Thank you again," Zelda said as they reached her door. "For everything." Cade nodded, his expression solemn in the moonlight. "No need for thanks. You'll earn your keep, I'm sure." He hesitated. "I meant what I said at dinner. I don't expect anything from you beyond the duties we agreed to. You and Emma are safe here." The fact that he felt the need to reassure her spoke volumes about what he must think of her situation, a fallen woman abandoned by her child's father. But there was no judgment in his tone, only a desire to set her mind at ease. "I know," she said simply. "Good night, Cade." "Good night, Zelda." She watched him walk back toward the main house, his figure outlined against the starlit sky, before entering her new home. For the first time in months, as she laid Emma in her cradle and prepared for bed, Zelda felt something akin to peace. They weren't safe, yet their security depended entirely on a man she barely knew, but it was a start, a chance at something better than what awaited them in Bannack. As spring blossomed into early summer, Zelda settled into life at Quinn Ranch. Her duties were straightforward: cooking meals, cleaning the main house, doing laundry, and occasionally mending clothes for Cade and Miguel. The work was hard but satisfying, and with Consuela's help, she managed to care for Emma while fulfilling her responsibilities. Cade was a fair employer, never criticizing her work and often expressing appreciation for the improvements she made to his home. He was gone much of the day, working with the horses or cattle, but they shared breakfast and dinner, sometimes joined by the Vasquezes, sometimes just the two of them with Emma. During those meals, Zelda began to learn more about the quiet rancher. He had grown up in Missouri, the son of a white settler and a Cheyenne woman who had died when he was 12. His father had raised him to be proud of both sides of his heritage, teaching him to read and write while also ensuring he learned the Cheyenne ways from his mother's brother. When the war came, Cade had enlisted with the Union, serving in a Missouri regiment. After Appomattox, he'd headed west, unwilling to return to a home filled with memories of those he'd lost. In turn, Zelda shared pieces of her own story: her childhood in Ohio as the daughter of a schoolteacher, her love of books, and eventually, hesitantly, how she had met Thomas at a town dance and been swept away by his charm and promises. "I was naive," she admitted one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, Emma sleeping in her lap. "I believed everything he told me. When I discovered I was with child, I thought surely he would marry me. Instead, he disappeared. My parents were." She swallowed hard. "They said I had brought shame on the family. They gave me money for a train ticket west, told me to find Thomas and make him do right by me. But when I got to Bannack, he wanted nothing to do with us." Cade's jaw tightened. "Some men don't deserve the name." "I was a fool," Zelda said softly. "You were young and in love," Cade corrected. "The fool was the man who couldn't recognize the treasure he had." His eyes met hers briefly before he looked away, as if embarrassed by his words. The comment lingered in Zelda's mind that night as she lay in bed, listening to Emma's soft breathing. Was that how Cade saw her, as a treasure? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. She wasn't ready to trust another man, not yet, perhaps not ever. Yet as the weeks passed, She found herself looking forward to those quiet evenings on the porch with Cade, to their conversations that ranged from books they had read to their hopes for the future. He was nothing like Thomas, where her former lover had been all flash and charm. Cade was substance and sincerity. He rarely spoke unless he had something worthwhile to say, but when he did speak, his words carried weight. By July, Emma was sitting up and babbling, delighting everyone with her sunny disposition and toothless grin. To Zelda's surprise, Cade took a particular interest in the baby, often holding her while Zelda prepared dinner or bringing her small toys he had carved himself. "You're good with her," Zelda observed one evening as Cade bounced Emma on his knee, making her giggle. "She makes it easy," he replied, smiling at the baby. "Got a good heart, this little one. You can see it in her eyes." "She likes you," Zelda said. "She doesn't take to just anyone that way." Cade looked up, his green eyes meeting hers. High praise coming from both of you. There was something in his gaze that made Zelda's heart beat faster. She looked away, suddenly flustered. "I should check on dinner," she murmured, rising from her chair. As she stirred the stew bubbling on the stove, Zelda acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding. She was developing feelings for Cade Quinn. Feelings that went far beyond gratitude for his kindness or appreciation for his fair treatment. She was drawn to his quiet strength, his integrity, the gentleness that belied his rugged exterior. But what could come of such feelings? She was his housekeeper, a fallen woman with a child born out of wedlock. He deserved better, a proper wife without her tarnished past, someone who could enter marriage with a clean slate. And yet, there were moments when she caught him looking at her with something more than the consideration of an employer for an employee. Times when his hand lingered a moment too long when he passed her a dish at dinner, or when his smile seemed meant only for her. One August afternoon, as Zelda hung laundry on the line behind her cabin, she spotted Cade returning from the pasture leading a small pony. He changed direction when he saw her, bringing the gentle-looking creature to where she stood. "What do you think?" he asked, patting the pony's neck. "Found her at a farm over near Virginia City. Owner was looking to sell." The pony was dappled gray with a white blaze on her face and kind brown eyes. "She's lovely," Zelda said. "Are you adding her to your breeding stock?" Cade shook his head. "Thought she might make a good mount for you once you're comfortable enough to ride on your own. And eventually for Emma when she's old enough." Zelda stared at him, stunned by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Cade, that's too generous. I couldn't accept such a gift." "Not a gift," he clarified quickly. "Consider it part of your wages. You've been here 4 months now, and I haven't given you much beyond room and board." "You've given us a home," Zelda said softly. "That's more than enough." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or a recognition of feelings neither was ready to voice. The moment was broken by Emma's cry from inside the cabin. "She's woken from her nap," Zelda said, stepping back. Cade nodded. "I'll put Daisy in the corral for now. We can start your riding lessons whenever you're ready." As promised, Cade began teaching Zelda to ride. She was nervous at first, but Daisy was as gentle as she looked, and Cade was a patient teacher. By late August, Zelda could ride confidently around the ranch, often with Emma secured in the sling Cade had fashioned. These riding lessons brought them closer, providing opportunities for conversation away from the main house and the knowing glances of Consuela, who had taken to making pointed comments about what a fine mother Zelda was and what a natural father Cade seemed to be. On a warm September afternoon, they rode to a secluded spot by a stream that ran through the property. Wildflowers still bloomed in profusion, and the cottonwood trees were just beginning to show hints of gold among their green leaves. They spread a blanket on the grass, and Zelda laid Emma down to play with a wooden rattle Cade had carved for her. "It's so peaceful here," Zelda said, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how much has changed in just a few months." "For the better, I hope," Cade replied, sitting beside her on the blanket. "Very much for the better." She smiled at him. "I don't know what would have become of us if you hadn't offered me the position that day." "I think you would have found your way," he said. "You're stronger than you know, Zelda." The way he said her name with a gentle reverence made her heart flutter. "Maybe," she conceded, "but I'm glad I didn't have to find out." They sat in companionable silence, watching Emma bat at butterflies that fluttered near the blanket. After a while, Cade spoke again, his voice more serious. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," he began. Zelda looked at him, curiosity mingled with a sudden nervousness. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about Emma." He glanced at the baby who had rolled onto her stomach and was trying to push herself up. "About her future." Uncertainty filled Zelda. Was he going to suggest they find another arrangement? Had she misread his affection for Emma? "What about her future?" she asked cautiously. Cade seemed to struggle with his words, unusual for a man normally so straightforward. "I meant what I said that day in the church," he finally said. "She deserves a real father, a man who'll teach her to ride and read, who'll scare off her suitors and walk her down the aisle someday." He took a deep breath. "I'd like to be that man, Zelda, for Emma, and for you if you'll have me." Zelda stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Are you asking me to marry you?" Cade met her gaze directly. "I am. I know it hasn't been long, and I know you've been hurt before, but I care for you, Zelda, both of you. I think we could build a good life together." Joy and fear warred within her. "But my past, Emma's birth." "The past is past," Cade said firmly. "I don't care about any of that. I care about who you are now, a loving mother, a kind woman, someone who works hard and never complains even when things are difficult." He reached out, tentatively taking her hand. "I'm not asking for an answer today. Take time to think about it, to be sure." Tears filled Zelda's eyes, not of sadness but of a happiness so intense it was almost painful. "I don't need time," she whispered. "My answer is yes." The smile that broke across Cade's face was like the sun emerging from clouds. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, respectful yet filled with promise. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "You've made me the happiest man in Montana territory," he murmured. Emma chose that moment to let out a gleeful squeal, as if giving her own approval to the match. They both laughed, and Cade reached over to scoop up the baby, holding her between them. "What do you say, little one?" he asked her. "Ready to make this official and become Emma Quinn?" The baby gurgled and grabbed at his nose, making them laugh again. It wasn't quite the traditional romantic proposal Zelda might have dreamed of as a girl, but it was perfect in its simplicity and sincerity, much like Cade himself. They were married 2 weeks later in the Bannock church, with Reverend Mills officiating and the Vasquezes standing as witnesses. Zelda wore a new dress of soft blue calico that Consuela had helped her make, and Emma was dressed in a white gown fashioned from one of Cade's old shirts. Sheriff Riley attended, along with a few of Cade's neighbors and business associates. Mrs. Hargrove, Zelda's former landlady, came too, clearly pleased that the young woman she had worried about had found such a respectable match. "Never would have guessed it would turn out this way when you stood in the rain that day," she told Zelda after the ceremony. "Just goes to show the Lord works in mysterious ways." "Indeed he does," Zelda thought as she watched Cade proudly showing Emma to a group of well-wishers. From abandonment and despair to love and family in the span of a few months, it seemed nothing short of miraculous. That night, After the small celebration at the ranch and after Emma had been put to bed in what was now the nursery in the main house, Cade carried Zelda across the threshold of their home. They had agreed that she would move into the ranch house, while her former cabin would eventually become Emma's playhouse when she was older. "Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the bedroom, their bedroom now. Zelda had been nervous about this moment, but as Cade's arms encircled her and his lips found hers, her anxiety melted away. This was Cade Honorable, gentle Cade who had never given her reason to fear or doubt him. The passion that had been building between them these past months could finally be expressed, and she surrendered to it willingly, finding in his embrace the love and acceptance she had long craved. Later, lying in the circle of his arms, Zelda marveled at the twists of fate that had brought her here. "If Thomas hadn't abandoned us," she murmured, "I never would have met you." Cade tightened his arms around her. "Then I owe the man a debt, though I'd still like to knock him flat if I ever meet him." Zelda laughed softly. "I think I'm past caring about Thomas. He gave me Emma, and in a roundabout way he led me to you. That's enough." "More than enough," Cade agreed, kissing her temple. "You and Emma are everything I never knew I wanted until I found you." The seasons turned, and with them, life at Quinn Ranch flourished. By the following spring, Zelda was expecting their first child together. Emma, now a toddler running on sturdy legs and chattering in increasingly complex sentences, seemed to understand that something special was happening. She would pat Zelda's growing belly and talk to her brover or sisser with great seriousness. Cade doted on both his wife and daughter, spending every spare moment with them despite the demands of the ranch. He had officially adopted Emma shortly after the wedding, giving her his name and, more importantly, his unconditional love. To see them together, Emma perched on Cade's shoulders, or helping him feed the chickens, no one would ever guess he wasn't her biological father. In July of 1866, under a sky filled with stars, Zelda gave birth to a son they named James Cade Quinn. Emma, allowed to stay up past her bedtime to meet her new brother, peered into the cradle with wide-eyed wonder. "He's so tiny," she whispered. "You were that small once," Cade told her, lifting her so she could see better. "Was I in Mama's tummy too?" Zelda and Cade exchanged glances. They had agreed they would never lie to Emma about her origins, but they would wait until she was old enough to understand. "You were," Zelda confirmed, "but in a different place before we came to live with Papa." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. "I'm glad we found Papa," she declared. "He's the best papa in the whole world." "That he is," Zelda agreed, reaching out to squeeze her husband's hand. As the years passed, the Quinn family grew along with the ranch. A daughter, Sarah, joined them in 1868, followed by another son, Daniel, in 1870. Emma blossomed into a bright, confident child who excelled at riding and reading, often accompanying Cade on his rounds of the ranch, and absorbing everything he taught her about horses and cattle. When Emma was 7, she came to Zelda with questions about why her last name had been changed from Porter to Quinn, while her siblings had always been Quinns. It was time for the truth, or at least a version of it appropriate for a child's understanding. "Before I met Papa," Zelda explained, sitting with Emma in the garden behind the house, "I was friends with another man. He was your father, but he wasn't ready to be a papa, so he went away before you were born." Emma considered this. "Was he a bad man?" Zelda chose her words carefully. "Not bad exactly. Just not brave enough or strong enough to be a father. It takes a special kind of courage to be a good parent. Like Papa has." "Yes, exactly like Papa. When he met us, he knew right away that he wanted to be your father, even though you weren't born from his body. That's what makes him so special. He chose to love you," Emma nodded solemnly. I'm glad he chose us. So am I, sweetheart, so am I. When Emma was 12, the family traveled to Bannack for the territorial fair. The town had grown since Zelda had lived there, though the gold mines were producing less and less. As they walked along the main street, Emma's hand in Cade's, a well-dressed man approached them, his eyes fixed on Zelda. Zelda Porter, is that you? It took her a moment to recognize Thomas Blackwell behind the fashionable beard and expensive suit. He looked prosperous but somehow diminished, his once charming smile now seeming shallow compared to Cade's genuine warmth. It's Zelda Quinn now, she replied calmly. Hello, Thomas. His eyes darted to Cade, then to the children Emma, James, Sarah, and little Daniel, who was perched on his father's shoulders. I see you've done well for yourself, he said, a hint of bitterness in his tone. Very well, Zelda agreed. She felt Cade's steady presence beside her, a source of strength. My husband, Cade Quinn, she introduced, and our children. Thomas's gaze lingered on Emma, who was watching him curiously. Something flickered in his expression, recognition, perhaps, or regret. The oldest girl. She has my mother's eyes. This is Emma, Zelda said, our daughter. The emphasis on our was subtle but clear. Emma was a Quinn now in every way that mattered. Thomas nodded awkwardly. Well, congratulations on your family. I should be going business to attend to. As he walked away, Emma looked up at her parents. Who was that man? Cade and Zelda exchanged glances. Someone from the past, Cade answered, squeezing Emma's hand. Not important now. That night, after the children were asleep in their hotel room, Zelda found Cade standing by the window, looking out at the town. Are you all right? She asked, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. He turned to face her. Seeing him didn't upset you? Zelda shook her head. Not at all. It was like seeing a stranger. Everything I felt for him, the love, the hurt, the anger, it's gone. She touched Cade's face gently. You're my present and my future. Thomas is just a shadow from the past. Cade pulled her close. When I think about how close I came to never meeting you. If I'd delayed my trip to Bannack by a day, if you'd found work elsewhere. But you didn't, and I didn't, Zelda reminded him. Some things are meant to be, I think. Like us, Cade murmured against her hair. Definitely like us. In the autumn of 1880, Quinn Ranch hosted a special celebration, Emma's wedding to Michael Donovan, a young doctor who had recently established a practice in Virginia City. At 18, Emma was a beautiful young woman with her mother's blonde hair, and as Thomas had noted years ago, her biological grandmother's blue eyes. But her strength of character, her quiet confidence, and her kind heart had been shaped by the man who had raised her, Cade Quinn, the cowboy who had once declared that a child deserves a real father and had become exactly that. The ceremony took place in the meadow where Cade and Zelda had ridden on that fateful day he had proposed. Now, a carefully tended garden with an arbor Cade had built specifically for the occasion. Emma had insisted there was no other place she would rather begin her married life than the land where her family's happiness had taken root. As Cade walked his daughter down the aisle of flowers, his face a mixture of pride and the inevitable sadness of a father giving away his firstborn, Zelda watched from the front row, surrounded by their other children, James, now 14 and nearly as tall as his father, Sarah, 12 and delicately beautiful, and Daniel, 10, with his father's green eyes and mischievous grin. Beside her sat Consuela and Miguel, now gray-haired but still vital, who had become like grandparents to the Quinn children. Guests filled the rows of chairs, neighbors, friends, and business associates who had watched the Quinn family and ranch prosper over the years. When Michael and Emma exchanged their vows, Zelda found herself remembering her own wedding day 15 years earlier, a simpler affair, but no less meaningful. She glanced at Cade, who was watching the young couple with suspiciously bright eyes, and felt a wave of gratitude for the life they had built together. That evening, as the celebration continued with music and dancing in the barn that had been decorated with lanterns and wildflowers, Cade found Zelda standing alone, watching their daughter dance with her new husband. "Happy?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Completely," she replied, leaning into him. "You've given her everything a father could, a name, a home, your love. Look at her, Cade. She's radiantly happy, secure in who she is and where she comes from. That's because of you." Cade shook his head. "Because of us. We did this together. Zelda built this family, this life." As they watched, Emma whispered something to Michael, then made her way through the crowd toward her parents. Her face was flushed with happiness, her eyes bright. "Papa, Mother," she said, taking their hands, "I wanted to thank you both. Not just for today, but for everything. For showing me what real love looks like, what a true marriage can be." Zelda felt tears spring to her eyes. "Oh, Emma, I know the truth of how our family began," Emma continued. "How Papa found us when we had nothing, how he chose to love us both. I've always known, even before you told me. It's in every story about that day in the church. Every time Papa looks at you, Mother, like you're the sun and moon combined." She squeezed their hands. "I'm going to Virginia City with Michael, but this ranch, this family, it will always be my heart's home." Cade pulled his daughter into a fierce embrace. "You'll always have a home here, Emma Quinn Donovan. Always." As Emma returned to her groom, Cade turned to Zelda, extending his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Quinn?" Zelda placed her hand in his, feeling the familiar calluses earned through years of honest work. "Always, Mr. Quinn." They moved onto the makeshift dance floor, swaying to the fiddle music under the lantern light. Around them, their family and friends celebrated. Their younger children darted between the dancers, and their eldest began her own journey with the man she loved. The ranch spread out beyond the barn, a testament to years of dedication and hard work, while above them, the Montana stars shone as brightly as they had on that long-ago night when a desperate young mother had faced an uncertain future. "You ever think about how it all began?" Zelda asked as they danced. "That rainy day in Bannack when you found me in the church." "Only every day," Cade replied, his arms tightening around her. "Best decision I ever made was offering you that job. And the second best." His green eyes, still as vibrant as they had been 15 years ago despite the lines that now framed them, crinkled with his smile. "Asking you to make it permanent." As the music swelled around them, Zelda laid her head against her husband's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. From abandonment to abundance, from destitution to devotion, their journey had not always been easy, but it had brought them here, to this perfect moment surrounded by the family they had created together. In the distance, Emma's laughter rang out, clear and joyful. The sound was the ultimate validation of Cade's words all those years ago. That child deserves a real father. He had become that father, and in doing so, had given both Emma and Zelda the greatest gift of all, a love that had healed old wounds and built a future filled with hope. Under the vast Montana sky, the Quinn family danced on, their story a testament to the enduring power of chosen love and the unexpected paths that lead to home.